The federal government's not in charge of elections, contrary to what the President of the United States thinks. And that's not just my opinion. That's the Constitution.
Can you believe it? In the 118-year history of the National Governors Association, it's never been led by a black person, well, not until today. And there he is. Mr. Chairman. We
can talk about that too.
We will talk about that. All right. Well, we are really excited to have you here with us.
Thank you,
this exclusive for The Root.
This is my first sit down since becoming the chair of the NGA.
I heard.
First sit down.
I heard. And that matters. That commitment matters.
It was intentional.
And so we are really excited to be here with you.
Thank you.
This original interview for The Root, presented by DoorDash. And so let's get started.
Absolutely.
When did the weight and the fullness of this 118-year journey, when did the moment hit you the hardest?
Wow. It's interesting because you have to get voted in for this. And so this is not something where anybody taps you or whatever like that. This is something where the other governors decide. Who do we want to lead us inside this moment? And in many ways, it was kind of like when I ran for governor, where there was not a person or a party boss or a political party that said, you know what, Wes Moore, the dude who had never run for office before in his life, the person who did not come from a political background, the person who had never spent time doing this politics thing, we want you to run for governor. Like, that never happened. And so I was never going to rely on the party to be able to put me in a position to be the governor. I had to rely on the people. And in some ways, the National Governors Association is very much the same way, where there is no, somebody calling the shots behind the curtain. It's the governors. They decide. And so when the governors turned around and said, we'd like for you to lead this organization, to first serve as vice chair with Kevin Stitt, who served as chair, who I've built a fantastic relationship with, the governor of Oklahoma. And now that I'm serving as chair, it was pretty humbling. Also simply because I knew the people who made the choice were my colleagues.
Yeah.
And that meant something.
Yeah, and speaking of your colleagues, Deval Patrick, former governor of Massachusetts, he reportedly told you the night before your 2023 inauguration about a regret that he had. Yeah. And you've cited this in a lot of conversations that you've had on the road, particularly as you've been campaigning for Black candidates this year. What was that regret? And what did you decide that you wouldn't repeat?
I'll never forget it, because I have such a respect for Deval Patrick. And it was the night before my inauguration when I became Maryland's first Black governor, but the third African-American ever elected governor in the history of this country. And I built a great relationship with the first and the second, Doug Wilder in Virginia and Deval Patrick in Massachusetts. And Deval actually came to my inauguration. And so the night before, we're talking. And he said something to me that I thought was so beautiful and profound. He said, he's talking about how proud he was of me and this journey that we went on. And he said, one of the only regrets that I have, he's like, I was the second African-American ever elected governor in this country. And he said, one of my regrets is I didn't start thinking about the third until after I left office. And that hit me so hard. And I remember thinking to myself that I pledged to never have to say that. And I have the utmost love and respect for Deval. But I think to myself, where right now I'm the only Black governor in America. But that's not a title that I enjoy. I don't like that title. And I don't want to hold on to it for very long, particularly because I think about being the third African-American ever elected governor in the history of this country, but it's not like I'm the third African-American ever qualified.
Double click on that.
You know what I mean? Like that is actually a very, like when people say, I'm the third African-American ever elected in the history of this country and people clap, I'm like, guys, that's not an applause line. That's indicting. And so I want to make sure that when we have really good candidates, like when we have A.G. Ford in Nevada, like when we have Keisha Lance Bottoms in Georgia, when we got Jermaine Johnson in South Carolina, like I want to make sure that we're out here supporting really good candidates, not just because, and in many ways, not just because they're African American, but because they're good candidates.
Yeah.
And they'll be very good governors.
We're going to talk about them a little bit later, but I want to talk about getting the gavel here in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
You are receiving this gavel. In fact, you received the gavel early today at the site of the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in American history, perpetuated by an American deeply influenced by white supremacist ideology. Here at the memorial, one of the more surprising things is that you look over my shoulder here, you see that it says 901. Well, that was before the bomb went off. And then if you pan over here, you can see 903. That's after the bomb went off. The tall chairs representing the adults, the little chairs representing the children who were killed in this bombing. How are you reflecting on that reality today?
Oof. You know, I think on moments of historic importance, I think it's always important to start the day with a historic grounding. And, you know, the morning of my inauguration, I was very intentional about how I wanted that morning to go. And actually, I started down at the Annapolis docks, where that was one of this country's first and largest slave ports. And we did a wreath laying, we said a prayer to the ancestors, and then we marched to the State House where I was inaugurated. And before I became the first ever Black chair of the National Governors Association, I was thankful to Kevin Stitt, the governor of Oklahoma, because we started this morning down at the memorial and the museum for the Oklahoma City bombing. And the thing about that moment, which was really powerful, was it wasn't just an acknowledgement of the horror of that day. I mean, 169 people died. 19 of them were children, babies, who these folks killed. But it was how the country and how Oklahoma responded. It was, you watched public service in a really beautiful form show itself. You saw humanity. You saw first responders running into a building, knowing that that building was still collapsing. It was the fact that you saw people who were willing to open their homes to first responders so they could get a shower, knowing that they had not been home in days. It was restaurants who closed their restaurants so they can cook food for people who are still trying to pull people from the rubble. It was like everybody got together and galvanized in a really powerful moment. And I think about this in context of this moment we find ourselves in now, where for a lot of people in our society, they feel abandoned, they feel hurt, they feel frustrated, they feel pained, they feel angry. And it's very easy for people to just kind of turn away and be like, you know what, this thing is broken and it's done and all the kind of stuff. But I think to myself that in those moments that we've had some of our hardest moments, whether it be things like the transatlantic slave trade or whether it be one of the greatest moments of domestic terrorism that our country's ever seen, what it took to get us out of these moments was God's grace and moral leadership. That in every single time this country was tested, God's grace and moral leadership was the thing that got us out. And so I used it, whether it was this morning or whether it was the inauguration day, I used those mornings as a moment of reflection and fuel. A reflection of our history, but then a fuel for saying that in this moment, if we have a unique opportunity to do something different, and we have a unique opportunity to lead us to a better place, or as in Psalm 61, to a rock that is higher than I, then that means that is going to demonstrate what to show whether or not we understood the assignment or not.
Yeah. I mean, and speaking of, you know, the impacts of white supremacy violence or folks who are inspired by white supremacy ideology, not far from here in Tulsa
That's right.
sits Black Wall Street,
That's right.
the Greenwood District, a place whose protected status depends on federal review under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. As you know, this week, federal regulators voted to move forward with a sweeping overhaul of that review process. And if that rule is finalized, do governors actually have the ability to fill the gap? Do they actually have the ability to protect sites like Greenwood on their own?
We have an obligation to do everything that we can do. I mean, listen, when you look at some of these pullbacks that we are seeing from our federal partners, they're not just devastating, they're disrespectful, right? And we know that in some cases that there is no state that has the balance sheet to fill the hole when the federal government basically decides to look at us and say to all of us, you're on your own. But we do have an obligation to be able to do everything in our part to, make the crooked places straight. I mean, I think about, for example, in the state of Maryland, where in Cambridge, Maryland, we have something called Pine Street, or in the Eastern Shore, something called Pine Street, which in many ways is the Eastern Shore is equivalent to Black Wall Street, right? A place where you had a collection of Black wealth that was robbed. Very similar to what we've seen with historic, redlining throughout the city of Baltimore and the state of Maryland. But there is a long history to wealth theft that has existed inside this country and Black wealth theft. But if you look at Pine Street, the Eastern Shore, we did an initiative called Just Communities in Maryland. And what Just Communities was, it said, we're going to put $400 million and we're going to prioritize that $400 million towards communities that have dealt with the impacts of Jim Crow, Reconstruction, the impacts of chattel slavery. And we're going to make sure that we're using that not just for a buildup, but also for the accumulation of real estate, home ownership, and Black wealth, right? And we're going to center the work on the historic injustices that took place and where these historic injustices took place. The reason I bring that up, do you know where I made that announcement?
Where did you make that announcement?
Right there in the Eastern Shore, right there in Cambridge, talking directly to the people of Pine Street. And so, does the federal government have an obligation? 100%. And the federal government cannot use its time, its energy, and its resources to rob thefts, nor can the federal government use its time and energy or resources to be able to deny our history.
Yeah, and speaking of denying our history, Governor, I mean, this isn't happening in isolation.
Yes.
The same week, South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace, she introduced a resolution to eliminate the Congressional Black Caucus, among other caucuses. And so whether it's, a historic Black neighborhood losing federal protection or a body of lawmakers losing their institutional standing, all that's happening in the same year. And so I've got to ask you, as NGA chair and as a leader in this fight, what are you actually prepared to do about it?
Yeah. Well, we need to be prepared to push back because, people think that, I look at the conversation around our HBCUs, where people will make an argument saying that, well, why do we need our HBCUs now? And my argument is this: I know our HBCUs are necessary for a moment like this because our HBCUs were built in a moment like this. That I'm very proud of the fact that we have 4 remarkable HBCUs inside of the state of Maryland. And the reason that we had HBCUs built in the first place was because of the discrepancy that existed when it came to educating Black students and providing proper pipelines into both the workforce and in terms of higher education opportunities that we had for Black students. So our HBCUs were then created to help them not just to fill that void, but to help to push a platform to push forward. When we came on board, I also saw that our HBCUs were being neglected and underfunded. And so since I've been the governor, we have now made historic funding to our HBCUs, over $1.3 billion that has gone to Maryland's HBCUs in funding. And people will say to me, they're like, well, why are you putting so much money, resources into these institutions? Because these institutions are part of the important fuel that's going to help to drive economic growth and economic opportunity for our larger society. The reason that we have in Maryland, not just an important legislative Black caucus, but the largest Black caucus in the entire country, that's not a deficit to the state of Maryland. These are my partners, and they are a tremendous asset to the state of Maryland. And I love the fact that I can work with them to drive an important agenda, because the agenda oftentimes of the legislative Black caucus is an agenda that's helping to drive the state of Maryland forward. And so I think that, Representative Mace or anyone else who has an opinion that there's not a need for a congressional Black caucus, what they might not realize is you're actually reminding us, and you're making the point as to why there needs to be a congressional Black caucus.
It looks like you might want to take her on a tour of Maryland, introduce her to some of your colleagues.
I would love that.
In the Maryland congressional, or the Maryland Black caucus.
And we got really important members as part of my delegation, whether it is Senator Angela Alsobrooks.
That's right.
Whether it's Kwesi Mfume, whether it's Representative Glenn Ivey. We got Adrian Bawafo who's about to join up. So anytime she wants to have a conversation, I know I'd love to have with her, and I'll bring some friends too.
All right, Nancy, you listening? Moving along, let's talk about Trump.
Yeah.
So walk me through it plainly. You were disinvited from the White House dinner. The president said you were not worthy. 18 Democratic governors threatened to boycott in solidarity, and then you were reinvited and you went. And so inquiring minds want to know, Governor, why'd you go?
Well, actually, I did not go to the dinner.
You went to the White House?
Yeah, we went because we actually had business meetings with the White House.
Okay.
And so I said, listen, if we are there to talk about things that are going to advance the issues of the people of my state, I will always work with anyone. I'm very clear. I will work with anyone, but I will bow to no one. But I'm not there to kiki. You know what I mean? I'm not there because, I heard you have a new chef. We're not doing that. But I will always make sure that the issues for my neighborhoods and my communities, that they are going to be heard, and we are going to advocate for them. And so I do take the idea that if I'm the representative of my state, if I'm the representative of 6.5 million people, I do take it very seriously that my job is to protect them. My job is to make sure that we are pushing forward. My job is to make sure that we are continuing the advancements that we are making as a state. But I'm nobody's simp and I'm nobody's sucker. And I think the White House understands that. Now, I think that's probably one of the reasons that the White House, that Donald Trump seems to have a problem with me. And I'm good with it. But I am who I am. I'm not going to change.
Governor, you said at the time, though, that being singled out for exclusion, it carried added weight as the nation's only Black governor. Now that you're the National Governor Association chair, does that title protect you, or does it just make you a bigger target?
Honestly, I don't know if I can be a bigger target. I'm very clear about how the White House and these MAGA folks feel about me. I get it.
Governor, just as a follow-up, is there a difference between being the Black governor and being a Black governor who happens to be Black, and which one do you carry into the chairmanship?
I think the thing that I carry with me is I am who I am. And I never skirt away from it. I'm deeply proud of my Blackness. I'm deeply proud of my history. I'm deeply proud of not just who I am and how I got there, but how I present myself. That when I walk into spaces, I walk into spaces with a very clear understanding that, I am not there because you wanted to sprinkle diversity into the room. Or when I walk into spaces, I'm not there because, I am, that you wanted to make a statement or you wanted to make yourself feel better about yourself, or because, because of someone's benevolence. That every space that I walk into, I'm there because the space got better because I showed up, because the space was waiting for me in the first place. And so I will walk into every space that I walk into very clear that I'm the governor of Maryland. I walk into every space saying that I'm a military veteran, that I am a political outsider, that I am the son of Joy and William Wesley Moore. My mother had been threatening me to go to military school ever since I was like 8. She, like I said, I mean, I'm thankful that I was raised by a remarkable one, an immigrant to this country who ended up becoming a single mom, who was then going to raise 3 kids on her own. And when I first had handcuffs my wrist by the time I was 11. And then when I was like 13 years old, my mom, after threatening me all these years, she was like, I'm going to send you to military school. And I was like, Mommy, I'm going to work harder. And she's like, no, I'm really going to send you to military school. And then when I was 13, I got sent. And I remember when people said, well, why did you choose to go to military school? And I had to remind people, no one chooses to go to military school. The choice is made for you. But it was a thing that ended up helping to save me, because it gave me a different trajectory for my life. It gave me a chance to reinvent myself. It gave me a chance to be around people who were going to fight and advocate for me. And it helped me to understand that we do live in a big and a beautiful and a bright world, and I actually had a place in it. I also walk in every space knowing that my Blackness is not something that I ever hide from or shirk or shy away from, because I also know that's not just part of my foundation. Mm-hmm. It's also part of my armor.
You still think of yourself as a political outsider even now as the chair of the National Governors Association?
Oh yeah. Here's the thing. It's like I'm always very clear that I'm not here because of a political system, nor am I here to carry its weight or to carry its water. I think when people talk about the Democratic Party this or the Republican Party that, I'm like honestly, y'all, to be clear, when I think about some of the policies that have most hurt my family and families like mine, I couldn't tell you if it was a Democratic author or a Republican author. I never thought about it, enough. What I can tell you is they were bad policies, and somebody who was sitting in some seat thought somehow this would be good for them, even if it harmed others. And so I never claim to try to work to gain entrance into a club when I don't think that club was something that was always beneficial to me or my family. I think what I want to do is I want to bring my own personal perspective, my own personal work ethic, and my own personal political philosophy into the work. And I will never try to be like them. I want to try to make them a little bit closer to how I view the world.
Does that mean that your political philosophy doesn't make you spooked by the democratic socialists that are winning races across the country? There are a lot of folks that are part of the Democratic establishment that are not too happy about that. There are a lot of folks that are reading polls that say may not turn out as well as it could in November if this trend holds. Are you spooked by it?
Not at all. I'm not spooked by it because I don't even think about it. I think anyone who's spending a whole lot of time on that, it's like y'all are acting like this is some political science class. You know what I mean? Like, what wing of the party are you a part of? Like, no one thinks that way. I don't know anybody in Maryland who I'm talking to who are like, what wing are you a part of? They're like, yo, who is going to address the fact that gas prices are so high? Mm-hmm. Who's going to address the fact that I can't buy a home in the neighborhood that I grew up? Who's going to address the fact that I want to be able to feel safe in my neighborhoods and my communities? I think there's a lot of people who are looking at this like it's, political science 101. When folks in communities are thinking about it like it's economics 101. Like I am not part of that system or part of a belief that the way you win elections is by trying to determine who you're running against. You know what I mean? Like I think the way you win, produce better results. Do you know how you win? Make it so that people see the work that you're doing. Do you know how you win? Like, for example, what we've done inside the state of Maryland, where we have amongst the fastest drops in violent crime anywhere in the United States of America, that we have now come on board and being able to add over 55,000 new businesses, making Maryland the best state in the country for Black-owned businesses, by being able to say we're going to do things like procurement reform and being able to actually add, be able to utilize state capital to be able to support minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, that we're able to now make this time in Maryland the time where we're having the fastest population increase in the state of Maryland that we've had in a decade. Do you know how you win? You deliver results for people.
Yeah.
And not necessarily saying this person is a Democrat and this person is not a Democrat. I don't understand, because if that's what you're talking about, then you're not actually spending time addressing the issues that people are genuinely feeling right now and the frustration they're feeling.
Yeah, and I've heard you say that, very often, talking about how Democrats, in your view, don't have a message problem as much as they have a results problem. I've heard you say that.
You have to deliver results, and think about it, right? When people start looking to other people or other places or other ideologies, generally, it's because they're not happy with yours, right? No one is like, yo, I'm so excited about the way things are going, so therefore, let me look at another candidate.
Yeah.
That's kind of not the way it works, you know what I mean? And so I think that the thing that you have to do, if you produce for people, if you show people that you are going to be focused, you're going to be deliberate, and you're going to deliver for them and their families, then you've got them. But if you have, whether it's, people on one side who say, you know what, this MAGA thing looks interesting, or people on another side who say, well, this thing looks interesting, whatever like that, it's generally not just because they have a charismatic leader or whatever like that. Generally, it also means maybe it's time to look in a mirror too.
And speaking of looking in the mirror, a lot of people say the president doesn't look in the mirror nearly enough. Have you spoken to the president one-on-one since that dinner controversy?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, the president will occasionally call or reach out or whatever. And here's the thing about the president is oftentimes when he does, it actually turns out to be a very nice conversation where he's very complimentary and he talks about the things that we're doing and saying you're doing a good job. And then, days later, he'll turn around and tweet about you, about how you're the worst thing on planet Earth.
So wait a minute, Governor. So you're saying the President of the United States, President Trump, has called you.
Yes.
And you have had conversations, plural, with him.
Yes.
And the conversations have been decent.
Yes.
And then you'll turn around and see a nasty tweet or he said something nasty about you in the press.
Yes. But the thing about it is, and yes, all that is accurate. The thing about it though is, and what really bothers me about it is not just the lack of consistency and the two-facedness. You know what I'm saying? Like I can deal with that. It's that his policies are so painful to the people I represent. It's like I can deal with I can deal with the fact that you can sit there and send nasty tweets about me and whatever like that. Like it is what it is. I faced much more difficult, opponents in my life than this man. But when your policies are doing things like kicking nearly 200,000 of my people off of healthcare, when your policies are kicking tens of thousands of my children off of food assistance, when your policies are doing things like having the highest inflation rate in 3 years and you're watching everything from gas prices to energy prices to grocery prices skyrocket, when your policies are doing things like enriching your own family, where this man has had the most successful financial years of his life, not when he was in business, when he was the president of the United States, when your policies are doing things like putting our people in wars that none of us asked for and none of us understand, but that we're all paying for, all so you can give billionaires tax cuts and kick people off of healthcare, then that is unforgivable. And so the behavior of the president is bad. The performance of the president, the cruelty of the president, the callous nature that he will do everything in his part to be able to make life tougher for the people of Maryland, despite all of our efforts to make life a little bit easier on the people of Maryland, is the thing that's unforgivable.
Governor Moore, let's move along. I want to talk about your agenda as the chair of the National Governors Association. Every NGA chair picks a signature initiative for their term. What's yours? And what's the one thing that you want governors in deep red states and governors in deep blue states to both be able to say you delivered?
Yeah, the initiative that we're going to focus on during my time as the chair is Service United. And that I really believe that service, a joint sense of service, is what is going to bring us to a better place. And there's really three reasons why I think that Service United is the right message for both Democratic and Republican governors, and one that I think there's a reason that it's caught so much energy already in the NGA. The first is I think it helps the individual, right? It helps the person, oftentimes the young person, who is trying to navigate their place in the world. We made Maryland the first state in the country that now has a service year option for all of our high school graduates. So every high school graduate in the state of Maryland has a chance to have a paid year of service to the state of Maryland, where they're making a living wage, they're getting a whole curriculum, and they're getting $6,000 at the end of it.
$6,000?
$6,000. And they can put it towards anything they want to put it towards, right? And so this helps them as they're then navigating and trying to figure out what is their place in the world. The second thing is, this has been a tremendous workforce development tool, particularly at a time when we're watching economies change so quickly. And we now have over 5 million people, Americans, who are between the ages of 16 and 25, who are not in college and not in school and not employed. So just kind of like out there. Mm-hmm. We have got a chance, if you give them a year of service to do something that they're passionate about, you have a chance to have a workforce development tool to now give them a pathway to something better. The third reason is because in this time of this political divisiveness and political vitriol, I believe that service will save us. And so by having Service United be this unifying rallying cry for both Democratic and Republican governors, I think it's going to become a very powerful way to not just show the impact of the NGA, but for the National Governors Association and for our nation's governors, Democrats and Republicans, to be able to unite, where I say I want 1 million young people having paid service opportunities in the next decade. And I think this is going to be a really powerful platform for us to be able to get there.
Speaking of powerful platforms, AI and data centers, from coast to coast,
Yeah.
people are talking about them. People are afraid of what the long-term implications might be. I know that your own state has fought over this. Maryland's Democratic primary candidates, they've run against data centers on cost and water grounds. And national polling, it shows public support cratering, down from 69% comfort in Virginia to 35% support now. I've got to ask you, as NGA chair, are you the governor who champions the AI economy for growth and jobs, or are you the governor who protects ratepayers and communities from it? And can you actually do both, if in fact you think you can do both?
Well, I can tell you from my perspective as the governor of Maryland, there are real challenges and problems that I have with the way that these data centers have been laid out. And I put very clear guidelines as to any project in Maryland that would receive my support, that these data centers, they must bring and also pay for all their own energy and all their own improvements. The taxpayers and the ratepayers cannot and will not pay for that. That they cannot pollute our air. They cannot pollute our water and think that is going to be okay. They have to hire local workers, and they need to be able to abide by the local interest in it. Local officials and local community groups. That, you know, when I became the governor, Maryland already had around 50 data centers already in our state. So this wasn't a new thing, and frankly, they were already moving forward fast on this. And if you look at Virginia, for example, my neighbor, Virginia has the highest cluster of data centers in not the United States, in the world, in Virginia, right? So I was like, but the problem is these data centers are basically writing their own rules. They were like, well, the local community doesn't want it, doesn't matter, we'll do it anyway. Oh, it's, we don't want to pay for our energy, don't matter, tell the ratepayer to pay for it. And so when we came on board, we said, yeah, that's not the way this is gonna go down. And that's not the way this is gonna work. So we had to put very real guardrails because I came in saying that we've got to do better than what was happening with data centers across the board in my state. Now, I know that you're right, it's not just a Maryland issue. Every governor is wrestling with this, and every governor is gonna figure out in their own state how they're gonna be able to navigate it, work with their local communities and work with their local centers. The thing that we have to be able to do is you've got to come up with a way that sees and supports the people, where the people are not losing their autonomy and the people are not losing their decision-making power. I am all for making sure that we can have economic growth that's going to benefit everybody. I'm all for making sure that we can support critical infrastructure. And I do believe that AI can be a very powerful tool for everything from healthcare to public safety to education. I also though know that it is a very powerful tool that we need to be able to establish guardrails around. And I do think the NGA and our nation's governors have got to play a stronger role because we're not getting anything from our federal partners. And when it comes to things like this critical infrastructure and data centers, that at least I can tell you in the state of Maryland, the data centers do not get to write the rules. They do not get to override local opinion. That we have to make sure that the power belongs to the people, and they're the ones that are going to help to determine how we're going to move forward in the state of Maryland.